परतत्त्वे सदा लीनो रामकृष्ण समाज्ञया यो धर्मस्थापनरतो वीरेशं तं नमाम्यहम्। वीरेशं तं नमाम्यहम्।
ओं नमो भगवते रामकृष्णाय। सर्वेषां हार्दं स्वागतं। सर्वेभ्यः शुभाशयाः नमस्काराः च। अद्यतनं विशेषव्याख्यानरूपं कार्यक्रमं वैदिकवेदमन्त्रघोषेण प्रारभामहे। वेदमन्त्रपाठार्थमाहूयन्ते विभागीयाश्छात्राः।
श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः। हरिः ओं। सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः। स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ यश्छन्दसामृषभो विश्वरूपः छन्दोभ्योऽध्यमृतात् सम्बभूव समेन्द्रो मेधया आस्पृणोतु। अमृतस्य देवधारणो भूयासम् शरीरं मे विचर्षणम् जिह्वा मे मधुमत्तमा कर्णाभ्यां भूरिविष्णुवम् ब्रह्मणः कोशोऽसि मेधया पिहितः श्रुतं मे गोपाय। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। हरिः ॐ तत्सत्। श्रीरामकृष्णार्पणमस्तु।
धन्यवादः छात्रेभ्यः। अद्य किञ्चन विशेषव्याख्यानं भवति। अत्र दर्शनशास्त्रे कृतपरिश्रमः अनन्तानन्द रामबच्चन् महाभागः अस्माकं मध्ये अस्ति। अद्वैता वन एंड मेनी इति विषये व्याख्यानं भविष्यति। आदौ स्वामी पादेभ्यः प्रणामान् विनिवेदयामि। रामबच्चन महाभागस्य हार्दं स्वागतं व्याहरामि। अत्र उपस्थितेभ्यः सम्मानेभ्यः विभागीयाध्यापकेभ्यश्च प्रीतिपूर्वकं नमस्काराः। सर्वेभ्यः छात्रेभ्यः शुभाशयाः।
ॐ यश्छन्दसा मृषभो विश्वरूपः छन्दोभ्योऽध्यमृतात् सम्बभूव समेन्द्रो मेधया स्पृणोतु अमृतस्य देवधारणो भूयासं शरीरं मे विचर्षणं जिह्वा मे मधुमत्तमा कर्णाभ्यां भूरिविश्रुवं ब्रह्मणः कोशोऽसि मेधया पिहितः श्रुतं मे गोपाय ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। नमः श्रीयतिराजाय विवेकानन्दसूरये सच्चित्सुखस्वरूपाय स्वामिने तापहारिणे। We're extremely delighted that we have in our midst Professor Anantanand Rambachan. He is a very old friend. We have been associated for nearly a decade and a half. In various conferences we may be coming to each other. It's always a delight to meet him. Scholarly persons usually make others feel that they are so scholarly that nobody can understand their scholarship. So you explain simple things in such a complicated way that nobody understands. Scientists always have a feeling they make things very precise, exact, and easy for everybody to understand. And scientists and people of literature always have a small conflict. There are two great scientists. One is Oppenheimer. All of you know this because thanks to this film. He was an extraordinary scientist who repented for having invented the atom bomb. And his good friend was Dirac, Paul Dirac. He was an outstanding physicist. His contributions to the world of physics and quantum theory enormous. Dirac was not at all happy that his friend should go into literature. Oppenheimer was very fond of literature, particularly the Bhagavad Gita, and the blast of the bomb, the Visurya Sahasrasya Bhavet Jugavaduthita, the Bhagavad Gita, the Vishwarupa Darshana, he quoted that. So he's seriously reading some literature. Dirac came to him, what are you studying there? Literature? You see, in science, we take up something which is complicated, difficult to understand, explain it in such a way that everybody understands. You know what they do in literature? They take up something which is very easy and describe it in such a way that nobody understands. They'll take up the sun, the moon, and the winds which are blowing, the sea which everybody sees. And the description which they give of this is something fantastic. When I first exposed to Sanskrit, I was terribly frightened because one teacher is teaching something, Sanskrit is being taught, I simply entered and sat there. Small children, younger than all of you, were sitting there. Shishupala Kavya is being taught there. Magha is describing the avatarana of Narada from the Swarga, 26 slokas or something. Simply is descending from the heavens to the earth, such graphic description which is very difficult to understand. So this is the story. But now he is a philosopher by training, profession and study, a very deep thinker. And he has his own perception of things, and extremely liberal is what I found in him. And he is now the professor of religion at St. Olaf College in Minnesota. He is also visiting professor at the Academy of the Study of World Religions at the University of Hamburg in Germany. His writings include Accomplishing the Accomplished, the Vedas as the source of valid knowledge in Shankara, limits of scripture, Vivekananda's reinterpretation of the authority of the Vedas, the Advaita worldview, God, world and humanity, a Hindu theology of liberation and essays in Hindu theology and so on. His scholarly interests include the Advaita, non-dual Vedanta tradition, Hindu ethics, liberation theology, inter-religious dialogue. The British Broadcasting Corporation transmitted a series of 25 lectures in Hinduism by Professor Rambachan around the world. He has been involved in interreligious relations and dialogue for 25 years as a Hindu contributor and analyst. He is active in the dialogue programs of the World Council of Churches, was a Hindu guest and presenter in 4 general assemblies of the World Council of Churches. He is involved in the consultation of the Pontifical Council of Interreligious Dialogue at the Vatican and currently participates as a Hindu theologian in the Ethics in Action dialogues in the Pontifical Academy of Sciences. He also serves as the president of the board, Arigato International, New York, a global organization advocating for the rights of children and mobilizing the resources of religions to overcome violence against children. He is a member of the Arigato International Advisory Group. He was recently elected as a co-president of Religions for Peace, the largest global interfaith network. This is in fact what brings him to India and to Calcutta and the Belur Math. He came here to participate in the global conference of the Arigato International, which was held in Bombay. I also visited him there. So he took off a few days. I've been pressing him to come here for so many years, but finally he could make it, and he is here for a few days. And we are very happy he was kind enough to accept to address all of you. He has given an interesting title, Advaita, the One and the Many. This has been a serious problem with all philosophy. The human mind, strangely, always goes towards oneness. Why it is doing so, we do not know. Even scientists, starting from Einstein downwards, all the quantum physicists, there should be only one substance, and the other should be only manifestations. There should be only one particle, of which every particle is a manifestation. So the oneness idea, which is called the unification principle, is a fundamental principle on which both philosophy, religion, and science, they rest. There are 4 fundamental principles. One is the classification principles. You go on classifying objects. The greatest classification that you know is the periodic classification of elements we studied in school chemistry. When 92 elements were discovered, they did not know how to classify them. So classify them according to certain periods and groups, as you know. And the periodic law is very interesting. When we studied in school, now I understand the philosophical implication of that. The periodic law says every element in the periodic table interacts with every other element in such a way as to reach the inert gas configuration nearest to it in the periodic table. Why inert gas? Inert gases are gases which do not interact at all. So the ultimate aim is non-interaction. The moment you interact, you are in trouble. That's why the ancient idea of Atma Rama, you just be by yourself, be absorbed in yourself. It's called Atma Rama, Atma Santushta, Atma Tushta, Atma Priyananda. So these are words which are used. You just be by yourself, be content, be happy. We need the external world to make us happy, little knowing that we have the source of happiness within us. Because of the Atman present everywhere, the source of happiness, we are happy. Nava are patyu kamaya pati priyo bhavatyat manastu kamaya pati priyo bhavati. Nava are sarvasya kamaya sarvam priyam bhavatyat manastu kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati. Atma vare drashtavyaha shrotavyo mantavyo nididhyasitavyaha. The teaching in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So there's the classification principle. Then you have the unification principle. There should be a unifying force when several forces were discovered of nature, the strong force, the weak force, the electromagnetic force, and the gravitational force, then human mind thought there can't be four different forces. There should be one force of which these forces should be manifestations. The three of them have unified so far. Abdul Salam and Professor Weinberg, they got the Nobel Prize for the unification of forces. Gravitation is still giving us the slip. We do not know whether there is two different laws for the macrocosm and the microcosm. This is also a huge question in physics as well as philosophy, whether these should be governed by two different laws as they are doing now. So how do you unify them? Then they brought out the superstring theory some years ago, and now they have given it up because they say it doesn't work. So human mind always wants to unify the whole thing. So the unification principle is also extremely important. Then you come to the generalization principle, where Vedanta scores a point. You generalize everything. All of us are sitting here. How do you generalize? You say somebody is from Maharashtra, somebody is from Himachal Pradesh, somebody is from Uttar Pradesh, somebody is from Bengal, somebody is from Kerala, somebody is from Karnataka. How do you generalize all of them? We'll say all of us are Indians. But what about a person who is not an Indian? From France, from Germany, from where? So you say, in general, they are all human beings. A cat or a dog peeps in and said, what about me? Are you going to leave me out? Oh, you are there. All right. Living beings. What about this table, this chair? They are serving us so well. So you can't leave them out. You say being. The greatest generalization that you can make is being. Being is called Sat. And that being which is Sat reveals itself because it's conscious. The self-revelation, Swayam Prakashatva, is inherent in Sat, which is called Chit. And awareness of Sat leads to bliss, Ananda. So Sat, Chit, Ananda is the largest generalization possible, and the entire Vedanta is based on this idea of generalization. How the one can become the many? If there's a becoming, then what happens to the oneness of the one? It doesn't become many. Several theories, including one is Advaita. Shankara will say it does not become the many, it appears as the many. Is the appearance real? As real as this? It is not exactly real, it is real as far as it goes. He accepts that also. Svakale Satyavada Bhati. And the Atman, which is the core of the essence of the whole thing, that is what gives us the existence of its existence. See, if you leave out the Atman, the whole thing becomes non-existence or asat. Tad Atmana vinirmuktam asat sampadyate. There is a statement he makes in the Kathopanishad. If you leave out the Atman, like Sri Ramakrishna says, you have 100,000, 1 million and so on, one followed by several zeros. If the one is taken out, the whole thing is zero. So that the essence is that Atman, and this Atman manifests in so many forms. Whether the manifestation is real, so what is reality? Different layers of reality. It appearance reality, pratibhasika, vyavaharika reality, practically you use it. Ultimately, the supreme reality, paramarthika reality is that there is one. A Ramanuja will come and say, then you have to explain this reality. Many. Explaining the many vis-a-vis the one, asserting that one is real, the other is unreal. These have been going on for millennia and will go on for several millennia. Says Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda have added, Vivekananda said, the one and the many are one and the same thing, seen by the same mind in different moods and different attitudes. There's one more theory which is added. We should remember that each one of them is only a theory for the explanation. It just states what it is. None of them is absolutely perfect, because the absolute perfect can be realized only when you become it. When you become it, there is no talk, ashabdamas parasham arupam abhyam and so on. So the only partial descriptions of the reality as far as the human mind goes. So nothing is superior, nothing is inferior. Each one has to be taken up by a mind to which it really appeals. So we'll know more of this one and the many from Rambachan. Sir, the floor is yours.
अत्र प्राथमिकं किञ्चिदुच्यते। अद्वैतम् इति तत्त्वम्। अविद्यमानं द्वैतं यस्मिन् तत् अद्वैतम्। भेदविकल्परहितम् इति तात्पर्यम्। वेदान्तानां विषयः कः इत्युक्तौ परं ब्रह्म प्रत्यगात्मभूतम् इति उच्यते। यदि प्रत्यगात्मभूतं तर्हि प्रत्युपाधि प्रत्यक्तत्वत्वेन अन्तःप्रविष्टम् इति आयाति। तर्हि बहुत्वम् आयातं। बहुत्वं यदि अङ्गीक्रियते तर्हि अद्वैतभङ्गप्रसङ्गः इति शङ्का उत्पद्यते। किमर्थम् इयं शङ्का इत्युक्ते ये पूर्वपक्षिणः भवन्ति ते अपि श्रुतिम् उदाहरन्ति। बहुस्यां प्रजायेयेति इति श्रुतिरेव अस्ति खलु। द्वासुपर्णा सयुजा सखाया इति मन्त्रः असति भेदे न प्रवर्तेत। भेदं पुरस्कृत्यैव इदं श्रुतिवचनं प्रवृत्तम् इति पूर्वपक्षिणः शङ्कायाः आशयः। तथा कटश्रुतौ अपि वयं पश्यामः, ऋतं पिबन्तौ सुकृतस्य लोके इत्यादि पठितमस्ति। तर्हि श्रुत्या एव खलु उच्यते नानात्वं विद्यते इति। तर्हि एकत्वं कथं संगच्छते इति प्रश्नः। अयं विचारः ब्रह्मसूत्रेषु अंशो नानाव्यपदेशादन्यथा चापि दाशकितवादी इत्यादि सूत्रे तत्र उक्तम्। इत्युक्ते वेदाध्यायिनां मध्ये एकदेशिनः आथर्वणिकाः तत्र एकं मन्त्रम् आमनन्ति। तत्र ब्रह्मदाश, ब्रह्मदासाः, ब्रह्म एव कितवः इत्यादि। इत्युक्ते हीनोदाहरणम् उदाहृत्य एतद्रूपेण अवस्थितम् अपि ब्रह्म एव इति तैः एवं गृहीतम्। तत्त्वं तु सत्यमेव अस्ति। तत् सिद्धान्तिनः वाक्यमिदं सूत्रे। अंशो नानाव्यपदेशाद् इति पूर्वपक्षी। इत्युक्ते वेदेषु नानानिर्देशः कृतः, अतः अंशत्वमापन्नं ब्रह्मणि इति आक्षेपः। तत्र उत्तरत्वेन बादरायण व्यासमहर्षिभिः प्रोक्तम् अन्यथा चापि एकत्वश्रुतिरपि विद्यते खलु इति कृत्वा समाधानमुक्तम्। तथा सति यदि एकमेव ब्रह्म बहुषु भूतेषु प्रत्यगात्मत्वेन वर्तते इति यदि उच्यते तर्हि पुनः कश्चन प्रश्नः उदेति। यदि प्रत्यगात्मत्वेन उपाधि स्थितं ब्रह्म तर्हि सर्वेषां यद्यद् दुःखं सुखं च तत् ब्रह्मणः एव इति आपन्नं खलु इति प्रश्नः क्रियते। तत्र किं वक्तव्यम्? तत्र प्रकाशः यथा प्रकाशादिवत् इति ब्रह्मसूत्रे उक्तम्। इत्युक्ते सूर्यस्य प्रकाशः सर्वं पदार्थं प्रकाशयति, तथापि मलिनपदार्थं यदा प्रकाशयति तद्गतं मालिन्यं किरणेन लिप्यते। तथा प्रतिभूतम् अवस्थितं ब्रह्म तत्तदुपाधिभेदेन बहुत्वेन भासमानम् अपि तद्गत लोकदुःखेन बाह्यमेव वर्तते इति श्रुतिः। सूर्यो यथा सर्वलोकस्य चक्षुः इत्यादौ वयं तत् पठामः। लोकदुःखेन बाह्यः इति उक्तम्। अत एव उपनिषत्सु वारं वारम् इदं तत्त्वमाम्नातम्। अग्निर्यथैको भुवनं प्रविष्टो रूपं रूपं प्रतिरूपो बभूव। एकस्तथा सर्वभूतान्तरात्मा रूपं रूपं प्रतिरूपो बहिश्च। पुनः वायुः उदाहरणेन तत्र तर्हि सर्वेषां बुद्धौ किमर्थं न भाति इदं तत्त्वं यदि श्रुतौ उच्यते? उपपत्तिभिश्च यदि प्रतिपाद्यते लोकगत उदाहरणेनैव तर्हि सर्वेषां कथम् इदं न ज्ञातं भवति? तत्र भगवत्पादाचार्यैः बहु सम्यक् उदीरितमस्ति। कुतार्किक पाषंड बुद्धि विचालितांतःकरणानां प्रमाणोपपन्नम अपि आत्मैकत्व विज्ञानम असकृदुच्यमानमपि अनृजु बुद्धीनां ब्राह्मणानां चेतसि नाधीयते। यदि रुजुत्वं न स्यात् इत्युक्ते साधन संपत्तिः यदि न स्यात् तर्हि तत्र ब्रह्मणः आत्मैकत्व विज्ञानं यदुच्यते तद् न अवभासते इति तैः तत्र सिद्धान्तितम्। इमे विचाराः अत्यन्तं स्फूर्तिदायकाः भवन्ति। अस्माकं महाभागः तद् अग्रे व्याख्यास्यति इति एतावदुक्त्वा विरमामि। जय रामकृष्ण।
अखण्डमण्डलाकारं व्याप्तं येन चराचरं तत्पदं दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वर गुरुर्साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। Puja Swamiji, I am deeply honored, I am deeply humbled to be here with all of you this afternoon. And I want to express my gratitude to Swamiji, Swami Atma Priyananda for convening this lecture today. As Swamiji said, we have known each other now for more than 15 years through our work with Religions for Peace, Arigato International, Elijah Interfaith Institute. We have met many times in different parts of the world. And you already, from what Swamiji has said this afternoon, you can understand why I am deeply attracted to him, because he brings the worlds of science and the world of spirituality together, showing that these are not incompatible, but they share a common quest for truth. And bringing these two worlds together, the worlds of science and the world of spirituality, is a major task, it's a major need of our times. And the Vedanta tradition is one of the traditions that is highly amenable to this discourse, this meeting of religion and science that Swamiji embodies. But I've always admired Swamiji for his wisdom and his compassion. I think he has an encyclopedic knowledge of the collected works of Swami Vivekananda and teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. He's never without an appropriate quote. Whenever we meet in conventions, a quote is always there on his lips. And when we met in Mumbai, I already have two important insights from him that I've been thinking about. He told me that an idea that enters the mind irrationally is not going to be easily displaced by rationality. And that's a very important insight. And secondly, he told me that no one should aspire to become like anyone else. We should be as inspired by others, but we should develop our own unique natures and gifts. So, with Swamiji's love and his blessings, we are here today. We just came back a few minutes ago from such a moving and powerful visit to Kamarpukur and Jairambati and all of the places there associated with Sharada Devi and Sri Ramakrishna. And I am very, very grateful that I had the opportunity to be on those sacred grounds, and of course, to be here on the sacred grounds of Belur Math. I am a student of Advaita, and I am here among you. You are all very learned about this tradition. I'm not sure I can say anything to you that you don't already know, but what I can do is to invite you to think with me about the meaning of Advaita. And Swamiji beautifully put it, that we have metaphors, we have analogies that are only helpful so far in thinking about what Advaita means. So there is always room for new and creative thinking and ways of understanding this tradition. I studied this tradition, like many of you here, in a very traditional way. First, I lived with my guru in Rishikesh, Puja Swami Dayananda Saraswati of Arsha Vidya, for 3 years, read the bhashyas of Shankara on Brahma Sutra, the Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, and then with his blessings I went back to university to put this learning in a larger intellectual, in a larger scholarly context. And I did my graduate studies. I was very interested in epistemological questions of Shankara, particularly Shankara's understanding of Shruti as a pramana. And I have published on that, but my interest in Advaita has grown, and I've become particularly interested in how Advaita speaks to our contemporary lives and contemporary challenges in our world. So just some preliminaries that you are all familiar with, and then I will get into the core of my talk. So Advaita, as you know so well, is a tradition that looks to the 4 Vedas, Rig, Sam, Yajur, Atharva, as sources of valid knowledge, pramana. Specifically, Advaita derives its core teachings from a reading and interpretation of the last sections of the Vedas, of course, the Upanishads. But it also looks to Brahma Sutras and to Bhagavad Gita. These 3 together consider the Prasthana Trayi of the Advaita tradition. Given the fact that Advaita regards the Vedas as pramana for Brahman, it is interesting that when Shankara speaks about the authority of the Vedas, he does not often cite their divine status. He doesn't say that these texts, although he accepts it, and we all accept that the Vedas have their origin in Brahman. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad speaks of the Vedas as the breath of the divine. But Shankara does not cite the origin of the Vedas as an argument for their authority. What does he cite? He says that they are authoritative because they satisfy the criteria of what a pramana does. And so a pramana, to be a pramana, a source of valid knowledge, has to satisfy at least 2 criteria. One, it has to tell us something that is novel, anadhigatatvam. It has to tell us something that no other pramana tells us. Because if it simply repeats what we know about the universe from another pramana, it becomes redundant. So each pramana must have a very special concern, what we speak of as novelty. It must teach us something that is novel, which means that for the Vedanta tradition broadly, the Veda as a pramana, and especially the Upanishads, have a very limited sphere of authority. So for example, history is not the authoritative sphere of the Vedas. Perhaps the Veda might offer us a an interpretation of the meaning of history, but it is not there to tell us historical information. That's the business of the historian. That's the first point. The second is perhaps the more important point about pramana, which is that the teachings, to be a pramana, the teachings of a valid source of knowledge must not be contradicted by another valid source of knowledge. In Sanskrit, abadhi tattvam. Non-contradictedness is really at the very heart of Shankara's defense of the Vedas as a pramana. And you see, as you read his bhashas, you see how this principle is constantly operating in his commentaries to show that what we know about the universe from the Vedas is not contradicted by any valid source of knowledge, because his fundamental premise is two valid sources of knowledge operating in their own proper sphere will not contradict each other. If they contradict each other, it will only be an apparent contradiction, but not a substantial contradiction. This is why he says in Bhagavad Gita that, if 100 Shruti sentences tell us that fire is cold, we can't take these sentences literally, because we know from pratyaksha perception that fire is warm. I mention this to link with what Swamiji has said, that by looking to the Vedas as pramana and not arguing that the Vedas are true merely because of their divine origin, what the great teachers have done, they have put the Vedas in a larger stream of knowledge. The Vedas must satisfy what any other valid source of knowledge must satisfy. So it opens up conversations across disciplines, which another argument may not do. It helps us to overcome the privatization of religious claims. To say, it would be contradictory to say, you can't question my claim because this is authoritative. You have to show why you're making that claim. Now, as both of our Swamijis have said, I think Advaita has two core interrelated claims. And I would say that these claims have not been contradicted by anything that we know from any source of knowledge. The first is Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. Everything is Brahman, the famous Chandogya Upanishad text. And the second is I am Atma Brahma, the Mandukya text. So Shankara interprets the Upanishads to teach that this universe has its origin in Brahman alone. So we find that he is arguing against cosmologies that propose insentient matter like Prakriti as the cause of the universe, as the origin of the universe, and coming back all the time to Brahman as the fundamental cause. And for Shankara, Brahman is both nimitta and upadana karanam. Brahman is both the intelligent cause of everything that exists, as well as the ground of all that exists. So this teaching that Brahman is the single, as Swamiji put it beautifully, the single being, we use big words sometimes in our philosophical discourse, the teaching that Brahman is the single ontological, we say, ontological reality, basically it means the single being, leads logically to the second claim, I am Atma, Brahman, that the Atma is Brahman. Brahman is available, always available, as the ultimate subject, the non-objectifiable awareness that is the ground of all mental and cognitive processes. All of this leads, Shankara to propose avidya as the fundamental problem, because the only way we can be separate from a reality like Brahman is by being ignorant of it, because there is no other kind of separation spatially or temporally. So what do we mean when we speak of this tradition as Advaita? Let me quickly say what we do not mean, and then try to say what we mean. So obviously, and Swamiji said at the very beginning of his beautiful Sanskrit address, that not to Advaita is a unambiguous rejection of dualism, ontological dualism. Sat is not plural. Sat is singular. So clearly, not to means it is a rejection of dualism. And so Shankara takes his starting point from those Upanishadic passages that affirm the existence of this one Sat, this one being before everything else. Sadeva Saumya idamagre asit ekameva advitiyam brahma. Repeats, one, ekam, advitiyam brahma. The focus is on being alone, one being alone, ekameva advitiyam, not two before the many. If there were two, then we would have started with dualism, and that would be a problem. And if we end with two, then we end back in a position of dualism. So there is no dualism clearly in the Upanishads. Before the many emerge from the one, there is only the one. And after the many emerge from the one, there is still not an ontological dualism. So Advaita is not dualism. Secondly, and this is often the second point that I want to make about what Advaita is not, is an important point, because many of the early interpreters of Advaita have described it as pantheism. Pantheism. Pantheism simply means world is God. World is God. Pantheism. And I'm saying that Advaita is a rejection of pantheism, understood as a literal transformation, and we heard that before, as a literal transformation of the one into the many, in a way that the one is no longer available. So pantheism is a form of parinamavada. The one has become transformed into the many. And this would also be problematic for Advaita, because if the one literally becomes subject to time and space and transformed into the many, then there is no liberation. Because liberation is the awakening to a knowledge of that one. And we see that Shankara does not equate the word world in any simplistic way with Brahman. There are many arguments to show that he is not teaching pantheism. But I just give you a quick glimpse into his arguments. He says in Brahma Sutra, Bhashya, that Brahman is described as cause and the world as effect. And this could only be so if there was some difference between the world and the Brahman. If there are no differences, you can't speak of one as cause and the other as effect, because that language presupposes some difference. In pantheism, the cause becomes the effect, and therefore these are not distinguished. That's the first point. Secondly, the relationship between Brahman and the world in Shankara is what I would call asymmetrical. The world as an effect of Brahman, as coming from Brahman, shares in the nature of Brahman. Brahman constitutes the truth of the world, but we can't reverse that statement. We can say world is Brahman, but we can't say Brahman is the world also, because that would be a limit on the nature of Brahman. As he puts it in English translation again in Brahma Sutra, the effect has the nature of the cause, not vice versa. The effect has the nature of the cause, not not vice versa. The one Brahman is the ground and source, and not vice versa. The fullness of Brahman is not compromised by being the source of the many. And so many mantras are there that speak to that. Pantheistic teachings, why I want to reject pantheism as an interpretation of Advaita, is that pantheistic teachings do not emphasize the transcendence of Brahman. Brahman is greater than the world. Brahman is more than and they limit the identity of Brahman to the world. But we have so many careful mantras in the Upanishad that seek to lift up for us this teaching on Brahman's transcendence. If you take even the language, the limits of language, yato vacho nivartante aprapya manasa saha, that from which all words retain. That's a statement about transcendence, that which cannot be described. And then all of the negative, via negativa, mantras that we have, that which is invisible, ungraspable, without lineage, etc., etc. All of these point to Brahman's transcendence and distinguish Brahman from familiar objects in the world. And these are arguments against pantheism. The whole of Kena Upanishad is an argument against pantheism, that which the yet chakshusha na pashyati, that which the eyes don't see, but because of which the eyes see, that is Brahman, not that which is worshipped or revered here as an object. Thirdly, more interesting distinction, not dualism, not pantheism, and I would say not panentheism. Not panentheism. So there's an en there. Pantheism and panentheism. So pantheism is word is God. Pantheism may be a step in that direction. World is in God. World is in God, panentheism. It's a very beautiful teaching, and there are many passages in Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, other Shastras that speak of this panentheistic vision. Isha vasyamidam sarvam. Everything should be wrapped or enveloped, everything is enveloped by the divine. Yatkincha jagatyam jagata. And if we turn to Bhagavad Gita, there are so many verses that suggest everything is in Krishna. All that exists only in Krishna. So many I would not. But why am I saying, while Advaita surely will not disagree with saying that everything is in Brahman, nothing exists apart from Brahman or outside of Brahman, because there's nothing outside of Brahman. Why am I saying it's not panentheism? I'm saying that because I think panentheism, simply saying that the world is in God, is still compatible with dualism. You can have the world in God, but still compatible with either dualism or plural ontologies. So Advaita is more. It says something more about the Brahman-world relationship than a panentheistic view would say. If I have a glass of water, in this glass of water I put a pebble, a stone, surely I'll say the stone exists in the glass. But Advaitas will say something more than that. The stone will have its own, satyam. So it's still compatible with dualism. Now, as Swami Atma Priyananda said, many interpreters of the Advaita tradition, in order to affirm or to hold on to keep the oneness, what we call the ontological singularity of Brahman, liken the world, to a sense illusion, which we conjure up because of our ignorance of the one. The view here is that if there is only one, then in reality there cannot be many. So if we see the many, then it is because we are conjuring up the many as a kind of a subjective projection of our own mind. So illusionism. I want to say Advaita is not also illusionism. It's not also illusionism, even though it's a popular interpretation of the meaning of Advaita. Now, Shankara himself does not support illusionism. Again, many arguments are there. In Brahma Sutra, Bhashya, he argues for the objective nature of the world, and he challenges the argument that what appears to be outside of the mind is an illusion. So he says external things are perceived as a matter of fact. It is wrong to say that external things do not exist merely on the ground that cognition is seen to have the likeness of an object, because the very likeness of an object is not possible unless the object be there. So he also cites pratyaksha for the objective reality of the world. The existence of the world is established by pratyaksha anumana. Many who argue for illusionism as sort of central to Advaita rely on an interpretation that equates our experiences of the world in the waking state with experiences in the dream state. The world is like a dream. And it's interesting that Shankara also argues against this, again in Brahma Sutra, all of these in the second chapter. The objects in a dream, he says, are negated in the waking state. But the objects seen in the waking state, I quote now, a pillar, for instance, is never sublated under any condition, never negated under any condition. Dreams are a phenomena of memory, Shankara argues, whereas objects in the waking state are experienced through valid pramanas. They cannot be made to disappear by any human agency. In fact, he interestingly also argues that he denies that the world of objects disappears on the attainment of liberation, and argues that the world exists both for the liberated and for the unliberated. But these may be differentiated on the basis of the different ways of seeing reality, understanding what they see. Both see, but there's a fundamental difference in what they see and how they see. The unliberated person attributes independent being, independent ontological being to the world, while the liberated sees the world as owing its being, owing its existence only to Brahman. So they see the same thing, but there is a world of difference in how these are seen. I think that the argument for illusionism as an interpretation of Advaita is also associated with those interpretations that attempt to disconnect the world from Brahman. In other words, the assumption that somehow, if Brahman is the intentional creator of the universe, something is wrong with Brahman. So the attempt to disassociate Brahman from the world is also behind some versions of this illusionism argument. But the fact is, again, if we turn to Shankara and we turn to the Upanishads, these both are uncompromising that the universe has its origin in Brahman alone. Shankara is Brahmavada, not Mayavada or Prakritivada, is Brahmavada. The world has its origin, its source in Brahman alone. And we can see this when he's arguing with Sankhya about Prakriti as the source of the world. He's very, vigorous in contesting anything but Brahman. The universe cannot possibly be thought of having its origin from any other factor, either pradhana, which is insentient, or atoms, or non-existence, or some other being under worldly conditions, hiranyagarbha, etc. Nor can it emerge spontaneously. So he comes back. And you can get all of these arguments if you in the Brahma Sutra Chatusruti. Janmadhyasya yataha. There's basically a case of Brahman alone as the cause of the universe. So, not dualism, not pantheism, not panentheism, not illusionism. I throw in there without getting, not monism also, because that's also a popular term that has been historically associated with Advaita. Advaita is a monistic philosophy. I think we have to move away from these kinds of words and look back to really what the Upanishads are saying and what the great Bhashyakaras are saying. There's always a danger of importing language, then we begin to miscommunicate. Because all of these words, pantheism, monism, they have their own histories. And these are not the same histories as we have in an Advaita Sampradaya. So let me now go try to finish up with a more positive, again, with some reservations, because we should not say anything positive. It is not true. But I want to try to answer the question. If all of these are not Advaita, what can we say Advaita is? Or can we say what Advaita is? And I turn briefly to the beautiful section of the Chandogya Upanishad, the wonderful conversation between Shvetaketu and his father Aruni. Very seminal text. As you know, Shvetaketu was a young man, like so many of you here, and his father wanted him to be learned, and he sent him to study Vedas. And then he came back when he was 24 years old, after 12 years of Veda study. And his father discovered that this boy came back very arrogant, very vain, and thought he was very learned. And so his father wanted to bring him down to the ground, awaken some humility in his son. So he asked him, did you ask for that teaching by which what is never heard of becomes heard, what is never thought of becomes thought of? In other words, did you ask about Brahman? And then Shvetaketu said, no, but I think it's my teacher's problem. Because if they knew, they would have told me. So he blames his teachers. They didn't know, so they never told me. That's the problem. These teachers, it's not my fault. And then he asks his father, please teach me. You be my teacher. Then we have all these beautiful, as Swamiji says, analogies, metaphors. Yatha saumi ekna mritpindena sarvam mrinmayam vigyatam. 4 examples I think are given there. By knowing a single lump of clay, everything else, all objects made of clay are known. Changes are in name only. Namadhyayam. Clay is the reality. Mrittiketyava satyam. And he goes on with gold and gold ornaments, and then nail cutter and objects made of nail. Now, the 3 analogies that I use here, clay, gold, iron, keeping in mind that these are finite examples, finite analogies, are helpful for understanding what not to is. Because it's a very unique relationship that Advaita is speaking about as far as the Brahman world relationship is concerned. So the term used here is vikara, modification. This is repeated in the 3 analogies that Aruni uses. Vikaro nama dehayam, that these modifications are in name only. Something new has come. The analogies would not mean anything if something new did not emerge. Whether it's a clay object a gold ornament or an iron object. Something happened. Something new came into being. Chandogya does not describe what came into being as an illusion. These analogies do not suggest, or there's no language of illusionism in these examples. What the analogies want to emphasize is that the many emerge from the one without subtracting or adding to its infinity. When you make something out of clay, you don't add anything to the being of clay, nor do you diminish the being of clay. So with creation, you have many beings, but still one being. Many beings, but still one being. I think that's the point of the analogies. And of course, the analogies also want to tell us and teach us that the many do not exist independently or separately from the one. Clay has no existence. Clay objects have no existence apart from clay. They do not subsist without clay. And this relationship may be properly described as not two. Right? Properly described as Advaita. To say that the clay and the clay objects are one will deny the fact of the clay objects. If you only lifted up the one, then you end up in some ways negating the many. And if you say they are two, the relationship is two, then you end up with Advaita or dualism. So you have to look for a new way of speaking. And Upanishads say it's Advitiyam, not two. Not two is different from saying one, it is different from saying two. Not two is a very beautiful way of speaking about Brahman and the universe, and there's a lot of scope in that expression, not two, to probe and to think about what this means. I think not two therefore expresses the unique relationship between Brahman and the universe. So in interpreting analogies like those in the Chandogya Upanishad, it is very easy to go to the extreme of devaluing and rendering insignificant the many. It's very easy to do that, and you know, because the text uses the word namadhyayam, the existent name only, but in fact, I think it's not that a clay object exists in name only, it exists because of Brahman, because of clay. The true subsistence of a clay object is clay, not the fact that you call it a pot. It doesn't change that fact. It is not word dependent for its existence, but I would say it is Brahman, or clay if you wish, to dependent. Now, what does this all mean? Why does it matter what I'm saying? What difference does it make to our understanding of Advaita? And this is where I want to conclude. Does it make any difference when compared to other interpretations such as monism and especially illusionism? I think that how we see the world in its relation, how we see the many in its relation to the one, does make a difference in our orientation to life in this world. And I think Advaita is, more than anything else, an orientation to life here and now in this world. Part of the problem of illusionism is that it can easily lead us to devalue the world, to turn away from the world and its challenges and its problems by reducing its ontological significance. Because some may argue, well, taking the problems of the world seriously is really attributing more reality to the world than we should. So illusionism is connected with interpretations of the meaning of Advaita and the meaning of moksha that equate it entirely with freedom from the world and from the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, but not a way of living a liberated life in this world. In this world. So, samsara, for example, when the world is described as samsara, the world can easily become devalued, and then you understand the meaning of moksha as liberation or freedom from the world. But if we think of samsara as a way of looking at the world, a way of understanding the world, a way that is rooted in avidya, and we think of moksha as an alternative way of understanding our lives in this world, then I think we get a ground for a new way of being in this world. So I don't think that to value the world and to engage the world, we don't have to give the world the same ontological status as Brahman. It does not. In fact, that would be very problematic. And we end up with, two parallel realities, Jagat and the Brahman. So we don't have to say that the world is ontologically equal to Brahman, to value the world and to value life into the world and to be dedicated to speaking to the problems of this world. I think the fact that the world derives its ontological reality from Brahman is in fact adds value to the world. If Brahman is the highest reality and the world derives its significance from that higher reality, then the world is. It receives its value from Brahman. So if the world is seen as positively expressing and participating in the fullness of Brahman, the world does not have to be rejected or devalued. It is not necessary to do that. So I am arguing for a world-embracing view of Advaita by reflecting on the meaning of not two. And I think this provides a basis for ethics and ethical transformation. Because unless we take the world seriously, not giving it ontological significance as Brahman, you can't have an ethical relationship with the world unless you attribute significance and meaning to our life in this world. I think what I am saying, and then I turn to you for your corrections if I am wrong in this, is consistent with Sri Ramakrishna. And I just tell one story that I love that he gave. And he told the story of this woman who went to see her weaver friend. And the weaver, who had been spinning different kinds of silk thread, was very happy to see her friend and said to her, "Friend, I can't tell you how happy I am to see you. Let me get some refreshments." So she left the room, and the woman looked at the threads of different colors and was tempted. So she hid a bundle of thread under one arm. And the weaver returned with the refreshments and began to feed her guest with great enthusiasm. But looking at the threads, she realized that her friend had taken a bundle when she went out of the room. So hitting upon a plan to get it back, she said, "Friend, it is so long since I have seen you, and this is a day of great joy for me. I feel very much like asking you to dance with me." The friend said, "Sister, I am feeling very happy too. So the two friends began to dance together, Sri Ramakrishna says. But when the weaver saw that her friend danced without raising both hands, she kept one hand and she danced with one hand above, she says, let us dance with both hands raised to show our happiness. This is how we will express ourselves. Let's raise our hands in joy and in freedom and dance. But the guest kept her hand pressed to her arm and danced only with one arm up. So the weaver said, how is this, friend? Why should you dance with only one hand raised? Come and dance with me. See, I'm raising both hands. Look at me. See how I dance with both hands raised. But she couldn't. She would not. She kept the arm at her side and said, this is all that I know to dance. And then Sri Ramakrishna said, he gives us why he's telling the story. He says, I do not press my arm to my side. Both my hands are free. I am not afraid of anything. I accept both the Nitya and the Leela, both the absolute and the relative, both the one, I would say, both the one and the many. I accept both the one and the many. And I think that he rejected any sharp division in the world between the realm of the sacred and what we might call the realm of the profane, the supernatural and the natural. For him, he embraced both as expressions of Brahman. It is Brahman, as he said, that has become the universe and its living beings. And therefore for him, the universe has value, and all living beings have value because of this source. I think this was a teaching that appeared in Swami Vivekananda's lectures and writings in so many ways. And he said very clearly on so many occasions, Swamiji would probably find so many quotations, that Advaita does not require the denunciation of the world. It is a renunciation of a certain interpretation of the significance of the world. And he quoted when he said that, Isha Upanishad, deify it. It is Brahman alone. Whatever exists in this universe is to be covered with Lord. The valuation through deification is extended also to relationships. So he spoke about deification, and Sri Ramakrishna spoke about embracing both the Nitya and the Leela. So for Swami Vivekananda also, I think the deification of the world meant overcoming hierarchies, hierarchical orderings of society. There are so many beautiful stories about Swami Vivekananda on this point. When he came to the United States, because of the color of his skin, he was taken by some people to be an Afro-American, an African, and he was abused for it. He never defended himself by saying that I was not African, I am Indian. In other words, he never privileged, also to justify the abuse of Africans. He never claimed that he was not African, even though he was abused for being taken as an African. One final story. He tells the story of being seized once, I think it was before he went to the United States, by a desire to have a smoke when he was going from Agra to Vrindavan. So he approached a man smoking at the side of the road and asked for a puff from his pipe. The man immediately told Swamiji that he was an untouchable. And Swamiji said, I withdrew and I continued my journey. And not long after, he said, I was very troubled by my response. I felt deep pangs of remorse for the way that I instinctively reacted. As a monk, he says, I gave up family, and I gave up caste, and I gave up social status. And here, I was turning away from this man. So he retraced his steps. He went back. And over the objections of the man, he took a puff from his pipe. Because for him, to renounce is to embrace. To renounce the world in a most profound way is to embrace the world. And I think this is the meaning he saw. Tena tyaktena bhunjita. To renounce is to embrace. To renounce is to enjoy. It may sound as a paradox, but I think there's a profound teaching there. So Swamiji, I want to honor time and give an opportunity for any comments or words that our distinguished audience might have to share. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Good evening, sir. You just gave a statement that we can say world is Brahma, but we cannot say Brahma is world. So what is the perspective behind this statement?
Okay, thank you very much for your question. The perspective is this. Think about an alternative example. I can say that pot is clay, but I cannot say clay is a pot. If I said clay is a pot, then I immediately limit what clay is to a pot. Because clay could be a pot, but I could make a form of a human being with clay. I can make anything, any shape or form out of clay. So I can say pot is clay, but I can't limit clay to pot alone, because the potential of clay, just speaking analogically, is infinite. Similarly, we can, and this is what I mean by asymmetrical. Similarly, we can say that world is Brahman, but we can't say Brahman is the world. Because the cause is always greater than the effect. The potential of the cause is always much greater than the effect. So that was the point that I was trying to make.
In the commentary of Ishavasyamidam Sarvam, the first verse, Shankaracharya said that Atmana eva idam sarvam, Atma eva sarvam. So that's why the question came into my mind, that Atma eva sarvam means Atma is Brahma, Brahma is everything, means Brahma is world. So that's why.
But he would not, even though you quoted rightly his bhashya there, but Shankara would not want to limit the Brahman to the world alone. And we have so many examples, if you look at, say, Purusha Sukta, for example, Brahman pervades the world with a quarter of his Brahmans being three-quarterized beyond this universe. So Brahman is always greater than anything we can say about Brahman, because its infinity is like infinity itself. Its infinity is clearly without limit. So we can't pin down Brahman to any particular object and limit it to that particular object, even to this world.
Thank you.
See this Agnaryatheko Humanam Pravishto, Swami Japasiddhanta is quoting. Remember the last line? Sarva Bhutantaratma Rupam Rupam Pratirupo Mahischa. We say Pratirupo Mahischa. Pratirupo, stop, then Mahischa. It pervades everything, but it's beyond this. Don't think it is limited by this. That's what they are saying, pantheism. It says everything is, God has become everything, God is exhausted. There is no God anymore. God is not exhausted by the world, although He can become the world. Suppose you say God cannot become the world, then all the omnipotence of God, Sarva Shaktimatattva of God is impaired. God can become anything. This is my argument I always use against people who talk about idolatry. There's one Swami, it seems, in Kerala. So Agamananda Swami, he was very powerful, he used to argue with the Christians. And then Christians said, "You're idolaters, you have so many images, God is not there." Then he said, "Your God is full of holes. Because you say God is all pervading, where there is idol, God is not there, so many holes will be there in your God." That means, since he said, our God is not limited. If God is infinite and all-pervading and omnipotent, cannot become the stone. So I always think, see, Hindus worship the tree, Hindus worship the river, etc. Other religions make fun of them. Now, I am a stupid, ignorant person, but I like to see God in this tree. I respect this tree because it gives me fruits, it gives me shade. I say, "Oh tree, you are God whom I worship." You may laugh at me, but God says, "See, this fellow wants to worship me as a tree. Let me enter into the tree and accept his worship. Why not? Ye yatha mam prapadyante tas tasaiva bhajamyaham." So you don't have to come to me, I will come to you. You worship me in some form, so I will accept that worship. See, the bhajami word is used, very, very difficult to translate into English. Ye yatha mam prapadyante, who come to me and then surrender to me. Bhajami aham. See, usually we do bhajana to God. How does God do bhajana to us? So what is the meaning of that bhajami? He respectfully accepts his worship because he knows that he can manifest in any way. And then he need not manifest also. He can be the impersonal personal. You don't compel God to manifest. There's another problem. Some people say, "Oh, you should not say God is always pervading, he is impersonal, he is no form." He may have, he chooses to. This is a big problem in quantum physics also. So he cannot do this. Big fight between Albert Einstein on the one hand and Niels Bohr on the other hand in Salve Congress. Einstein did not believe in the probabilistic interpretation of quantum mechanics. He said, I don't believe God plays dice. It can be 4, it can be 10. Then Niels Bohr quipped, "You can't dictate to God what he should do." He is Ichamai, he can operate in any way he likes. So Hinduism, as he beautifully said, quoting Ramakrishna, you enjoy in so many forms. You like God with form? Come on, I'm with you. Let's enjoy. "Sir, I don't like without form." "You don't know? All right, I'm also with you. Come on, let us enjoy that." So Ramakrishna has a beautiful statement. I'm a glutton in the spiritual field. A glutton is a person, he does not eat because he is hungry. He eats because he wants to taste food. So he says, "I want to taste God in innumerable ways." And there is no end to the number of human minds. And therefore there is no end to the number of ways in which God is being tasted and worshipped, innumerable being. I am with everybody. There is the idea of bhavamukha or vijnana which he spoke about.
Sir, good evening, sir. You have stated that Advaita is different from illusionism. Then my question is, how could, if it is different, then how could we define that the same Brahma is taking various shapes and all these things? Because Brahma has some different attributes and these forms have difference. So how this differentiation has to be accommodated in that perspective?
Well, when I said that Advaita is not illusionism, I think, as Swamiji said, there have been many theories to try to explain and to describe the relationship between the one and the many. And all of these are helpful, but they only go so far. So, in order to preserve, some interpreters think that in order to preserve the infinity of Brahman, you have to say that everything else that exists is only an illusion. In other words, nothing else really exists. Everything is illusory. And some go to the extent of saying that the illusions, which include the world and everything else, are subjective. They're projections of our own mind. That's how they feel, that by denying the many, you preserve the infinity of the one. I was saying, or trying to argue, that I do not think that you have necessarily to deny the many in order to affirm or to preserve the one. The core, and I have two luminaries sitting on both sides of me. The core Advaita claim is what we call ontological singularity. There's only one reality. And as long as we can hold on to that claim, that core claim, that's a claim that we can't bargain over. As long as we can hold on to that claim and find a way of explaining the significance of the many, then Advaita is not compromised. Advaita is not compromised. When will Advaita be compromised? Only if we admit ontological dualism or ontological pluralism. So I think that there is a way, and I think that way is finding a way of understanding that can affirm the one and at the same time not dismiss the many as illusions. That's the argument.
It is not an illusion at all, or is it existence as such, or?
I think illusion is just one way of speaking, it is not a good word to translate, the famous, in 2 lines, Brahma Satya, Jagan Mithya, Jivo Brahmaiva Napara. In many English translations, you see Mithya translated as illusion. Brahma Satya, world is illusion. But Mithya is not, I will not translate Mithya as illusion. I think Mithya means many things. One, we speak of something as Mithya if it is an effect of something else. So, world is an effect of Brahman. Brahman is cause, world is effect. Secondly, we speak of something as Mithya when it has a dependent existence. It does not exist independently of its cause. Like this shawl is cotton. It does not exist independently of the cotton. It has a dependent existence. So it's in effect, it is caused, it has a dependent existence, but it is not my private projection. We think of illusion more as a projection of the human mind. But Shankara argues, and I said before, that we can't dismiss this world because this is Brahman Kalpita. This is Brahman's creation. It's not your or my. It's not our private creation. It is Brahman's creation. Therefore, we have to find ways of, and this is the whole purpose of my lecture. How do we describe that relationship in a way that helps us also not to be dismissive of the world, not to negate the significance of the world or our lives in it? Because if you think of it, we have to ask ourselves also, what kind of way of being in this world, what kind of ethical commitments do we derive from thinking of the world as illusion? What does it ask of us, of our way of being in the world, if we say that the world is illusion? And what are the alternatives of describing the Brahman world relationship that does not take us to illusion, preserving not to, but not illusion?
The post-corona interpretation, a beautiful word for mithya is virtual. So you see, I see somebody on the screen, they can talk to me, the video call that you make on the mobile phone, is it real? Are you seeing the real person? Of course I see him, I talk to him. Is it really real? No, it is not that much real. So we call it virtual. So the virtual reality of the world has to be admitted. And interestingly, Advaita became misinterpreted by saying Jagan Mithya. Somebody is dying and then you are not trying to help him, the Jagan Mithya hai. So even all of you know about Vedantas, our Advaita Siddhi, the Mithyatva Lakshana and all that. The Mithya, see, there is one entity which is absolute Sat. That is only Brahman. Shankara is very clear about it. And there are some entities that are absolute Asat, like Vantyaputra, like Shashashringa and so on. Is the world absolute Sat? Of course no. Is absolute Asat? Of course I am seeing you, talking to you. So they had to invent a technical word to describe that which is neither absolute Sat nor absolute Asat. They called it Mithya. Unfortunately, the foreigners came and translated the unreal. The whole thing was hijacked. And that created havoc in India for centuries. Till the great scholars, great saints, in fact Shankara himself. You know what was Shankara's first mission in life? As a 5-year-old child, he saw a very poor woman, an old lady. Tears came to that young child, and he sang that famous Kanakadhara Stotram, so that golden amalaki started pouring down. I always say Shankara's first mission as the greatest of Advaitins in this world is removal of poverty. Swami Vivekananda himself, when he was a child, people used to come, beggars used to come, whatever he had, he had to throw. So his mother locked him up in a room, he opened the window and threw the costliest saris of his mother. Swami Vivekananda's birthplace, we will see it tomorrow, that window is always kept open in memory of that incident. So these great men did not come to philosophize, to negate this, to completely deny this world. So remember that Brahman, which is the basis of all this, even when you are in the world. Swamiji has a beautiful lecture, God in Everything. See, from Ishavasya Upanishad, he says the two types of people miss the mark. One person who deeply enters into the world and its enjoyments, etc., gets lost. The other simply runs away from the world, completely cuts him out from the world, denies it as mithya. Both of them miss the mark. He is the person who enters into the world and sees the manifestation of same God everywhere and enjoys that bliss, dancing with both hands. So he says an Ajnani does not know that Brahman exists. A Jnani knows Brahman, but he misses the mark by denying this world. A Vijnani is one person who comes back and sees that same Brahman is present everywhere, and therefore he enjoys. Then he uses another word, difficult to translate into English, Kachiye Khele. Kachiye Khele, any translations? See, you play the game of chess at the flame of Ludo, etc. An expert player is almost near the end. When he reaches 100, he will escape. He doesn't want to escape. He again comes back intentionally just to enjoy the play. So he says, a Vijnani is a person who likes to enjoy the play. Why do you run away from the play? Come on, let us enjoy. Because he knows I will never be caught. He has realized of Brahman, he can never be caught by Maya. So he enters into Maya, plays with Maya a little and comes back. So Maya blesses him. Shankara's famous stotras.
Duality, put it very simply, Advaita means that Advaita takes its stand in the Upanishad that there is a single Sat. We say ontological singularity. There's only one fundamental cause of everything else. Duality would say that we have at least two, make up a word, Sats, parallel, side by side. And then what happens is both will limit each other. If you have two fundamental realities, then one would be limiting the other. And that would be, dualities would be plural, or at least two fundamental realities. Advaita denies that by the claim that everything has the nature of Brahman. So there's only one Sat, and that the many are, as Swamiji said, the many emerge from it, they are sustained by it, return to it. This is what Taittiriya Upanishad says in its definition of Brahman, that from which all beings have come, that by which they all sustain, that to which everything returns. I wanted to make one small point again, just building on what Swamiji said. Now, I take very seriously those Upanishadic passages like Chandogya's text, Sadeva Somya Idam Agra Asite Kameva Advitiyam Brahman. And then Taittiriya, Sokamayata Bahusyam Prajayeti Satapotapyata Satapastaptva Idagum Sarvam Asrajata Yadidam Kincha Tasvishva. These texts for me are texts that speak profoundly, deeply about intentionality, purposefulness. Especially in those words, Satapotapyata, Satapastaptva, that Brahman conceived it all with deep intention, deep will. Tapas means, tapas is heat producing, as we say. So there's a great intentionality, there's a great purposefulness in such texts. May I become many. And therefore, those kinds of texts, and then you have Mundaka Upanishad goes on so beautifully to list everything. And it's a comprehensive list of the specific things. Even the last word, and corn, also it comes from Brahman. I read such Upanishadic passages that speak of intentionality, purposefulness of Brahman in producing the many as texts that affirm the value of the many, because they are outcomes of the tapas of. So if I devalue the many, I'm in some ways also dishonoring or devaluing the source from which everything else comes.
When today is Rasa Purnima, all of you know, the same idea, the Lord becomes, let me play. The Lord is a great player, you should know. He is full of joy, he wants to play. So call all the jivas in the world, convert them into women. Well, just because unless there is a romance, nobody will read it. That's why they made it. So he started playing with all the jivas. Rasa Purnima means the Lord, Paramatman, playing with all the jivatman all night and day and enjoying himself. The Bhagavatam says, you will be able to quote the verse, that just like a child playing with his own image, so many images, the child is playing with his own image. So there is another question raised in the Mandukya Upanishad. So if he is without any kama, how did he have any kamana even to say, I want to become many? Kamayata, etc. Does I have a Lord? All these questions cannot be asked and solved. How did Brahman think it should project the many? This question is not answerable because you can't question Brahman. Brahman is beyond all logic and reason. Brahman says, I like to do it. You do what you like. What can you do? So that's why the Bhakti school completely took up the other side and enjoying the world and as Brahman, as projection of reality. And sometimes the ultra Advaita is very so dry, they simply said in the world is unreal. Say, you suffer, I am very happy, dancing with both hands. So thank you very much. So we're extremely delighted that we could Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnad Purnamajachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Thank you so much.
Om स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। रामकृष्णाय ते